The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Welcome back. It's another episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author. It's going to be a short one today, but it's going to be a fun one because we are going to be chatting with Funky Buddha Brewery. You know them, you love them, and I've been very lucky to watch them grow since they're relatively close to my own backyard. We're actually going to be speaking with founder Ryan Sentz. I spoke with him a long time ago when I was getting the blog up and running, and he was very gracious enough to give me a nice long interview long before the podcast ever came around. And we decided to chat with him again about a few different releases that they actually have. Obviously, the first one that we're going to talk about aren't so much the beers as much as they are the seltzers. Funky Buddha Brewing has jumped on the hard seltzer bandwagon pretty nicely, and I will say that they are some of our favorite seltzers nationally, not just here in the state of Florida. So we're going to be chatting with him about the history of that, some of the difficulties that hard seltzers have when brewing them because they aren't quite as simple as making a beer, and beer's not exactly simple. And we'll actually learn a little bit of insider information about the next round of seltzers that'll be coming out in Q1 of 2021. The other thing that we're going to be chatting about is going to make a lot more sense to you if you are very familiar with hockey. If you ever listen to the podcast or read the blog, you'll know that hockey is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm very lucky that my team just happened to have won the Stanley Cup this year. But Funky Buddha actually has a very good couple-year standing relationship with the Florida Panthers. And over the winter break, the NHL, in conjunction with Adidas, their official uniform supplier, released a series of retro remix jerseys. So it's an old style of jersey that each of the teams had, but the colors are slightly different and the designs are slightly different, and every team has one. In conjunction with the Florida Panthers and their retro remix jersey, Funky Buddha has decided to release the retro recipe for their signature Floridian hefeweizen. And I didn't realize that the Floridian that I sampled in Oakland Park many years ago and the one that you can get on store shelves right now was not the original recipe. It's actually quite interesting. So we'll chat with Ryan about both of those, and I will leave you to it. Enjoy.
All right, so Ryan, you have been making beer in South Florida for several years, but obviously you, amongst everybody else, have sort of noticed that the hard seltzer trend kind of took the market by storm. I guess, were you prepared for how much the hard seltzer industry sort of exploded, and what was the time at which time you and the rest of Funky Buddha said, it's time to jump into this?
Was I prepared? You've seen these things, different things pop up over the years. Hard sodas looked like they were going to be really big a few years back. They got really, not your grandfather's or your root beer, and that went away. So yeah, we were always ready for things to kind of come and go. This one, we had a feeling it wasn't a fad. It was more of a trend, just because you see the industry, and I think just society in general trying to trend more towards better for you beverages, lower calorie, lower carbs. So wasn't really surprised, but when we saw it happening, we definitely wanted to get on board.
Okay, and so what were the steps that you used to make a seltzer? Because from the people that I've spoken to that have made it, it's a little bit different in some ways, and in other ways, it's a lot harder than just making the beers that you know how to make and are known for.
Yeah, I mean, it's different and it's the same in different ingredients, but the same in that it's fermentation and flavors and, keeping things clean and sterile, and maybe a little more difficult in that it is so neutral that things are going to kind of shine through a little more any problems that you had. To me, it wasn't, and I think to a lot of people, I don't think it's extremely difficult. The ingredients that you're using, we're using cane sugar and agave, very similar yeast strains, yeast nutrients, and the basic science and the principles are all the same. So if you can brew beer, it's not a hard leap, in my opinion. I think that's why you're seeing so many breweries that are doing it. And the equipment is virtually the same. We have some different filtration that we have set up for it. So it does have to be a cleaner product. A cleaner meaning more clear and less sediment. But other than that, it's, if you're running a brewery, you can make hard seltzer.
And one thing that is a little bit different that I am actually kind of interested in are the cans themselves, because with hard seltzer, obviously the big boys that we won't name here, they went for a can that still has the same amount of liquid, but is taller and thinner. Was that a decision made to sort of be similar to those? And are there any specific logistical and canning situations that having a can that is so distinctively different from your average 12 or 16 ounce tall boy that it makes canning a little bit more of a challenge?
Not more of a challenge. I mean, you do have to have a different setup on the line. So, most canning lines are going to be set up to run the 12 ounce of the tall boys. The tall boys are just obviously slightly taller, but the same diameter. So you do have to have a different setup, which we do. And yeah, it's more of a marketing decision. I think that is what people were used to seeing with seltzers, and so that's why we chose to. We went a little different on our packaging compared to most. Most of the major brands that were out there were very white with a little bit of color. Where we, our branding, our box, our cartons, a lot brighter, more of a focus on flavor versus just kind of, I guess, water, which is what a lot of them seem like.
Yeah, the flavors are definitely very interesting. They're very South Florida. They're very tropical. How did you decide on those 4 particular flavors that you currently have in the pack? And are there plans to release any different variants in the coming months?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so the flavors, the way we chose them, we must have done panels for months and months and months, well over a year actually. And not only what people wanted to see before they ever drank it, but then even if they said, oh, what I would love is this, then we tried to do it to see if it actually tested well and people liked it. So there was, 20, 30 panels before we came up with those final flavors. The most popular in the pack is the one you said tropical, which is the mango guava. And because of that, we are going with our next variety is going to be a tropical mix pack. So we're doing 4 new flavors, and we're going to keep the original, and then we're introducing a tropical one, which will, if you want me to tell you, it's star fruit, dragon fruit, passion fruit.
Nice.
Pineapple, coconut. And
of course.
What is the 4th one? Tangerine, kiwi.
Oh, those all sound absolutely fantastic.
So, I'm very excited for them.
Yeah, and when will those be expected to be out on the market?
We finalize the formulas, and you send everything in for approval. We're working on the recipes now, dialing everything in, but they should be out in public sets or different grocery stores in March of next year.
Okay, excellent. And in terms of the flavors, is this something where generally go because of the scale that you're going for? You're looking for adjuncts or syrups or purees, or do you try to do as much fresh as possible?
With the seltzer flavors?
Yes.
Or in general with what we do?
Well, I guess a little bit of both, because you do have a lot of, obviously we're not going to mention like maple bacon coffee porter because it doesn't exactly grow on trees, but you do have a lot of excellent fruit treated beers that you have been known to release from time to time. So yeah, so for the beers, for the seltzers, everything.
Thanks. I think it depends on, I guess maybe I've set you up for this. I think it depends on what we're doing and what works. I mean, sometimes we've used real fruit. Sometimes we've used purees. Sometimes we've used concentrates. It depends on what we end up thinking is the best, maybe what's the most shelf stable, what we can get more readily. So we've used natural flavors. We've never used anything artificial. It really just depends on, we've literally used everything with the exception of artificial flavors.
Awesome. That's amazing. And one of the other things that you used to use fruit in, and this sort of blew my mind because I did not realize this, was your original recipe for Floridian. And because of your connection with the Florida Panthers, obviously every NHL team in the league has just released, in conjunction with Adidas, the new uniform supplier or the jersey supplier, they released their retro remix jerseys, which are kind of the old school logos with the colors slightly reimagined and such. And because you have such a good relationship with the Panthers and because of their retro jersey, you are going, and in the very beginning of December of 2020, you're releasing the retro version of the original recipe for Floridian.
Yeah, so we're dusting off the recipe and bringing it back. Yeah, the original one, which I want to say was 2009, and that's one of the few names that we've kept over the years. That Floridian and Hop Gun were original recipes from back in Boca in the lounge days. But my original take on it was I wanted it to be more like kind of an orange creamsicle. So it was orange zest and vanilla in a hefeweizen. And one of the reasons why we stopped doing it, because we loved it and we kept it going for years, was just the idea of having to, we were doing 35-gallon batches back then. So the idea of doing zesting oranges and peeling individual vanilla beans for 900 gallons or 1,800 gallons, we quickly realized that wasn't feasible. And I think while I love the old Floridian, we wanted something that was a little more approachable for maybe not all like craft fans, like just your average everyday drinker, which is what our current Floridian is more of a true, hefeweizen.
Yeah, because I would say the first time that I had Floridian, I know it wasn't too long after the Oakland Park facility had opened, because I remember having it on the tour. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. But from what I'm hearing, that was not the original recipe. The original recipe had sort of stayed in the lounge back in those days and sort of gone that way.
Yeah, we knew that. We knew we weren't bringing that over when I was just scaling up the recipe, and I said, this will take 3 weeks to zest enough oranges for a small batch, and this is something we hope to grow. So, and again, more than that, we just thought, is this something that is going to appeal to as many people as possible in your everyday drinker?
Okay, so I guess, how did your relationship with the Florida Panthers come about, and then how did both groups decide that because this jersey's coming out, now's the time to dust off this ancient piece of funky Buddha history?
I mean, as far as our relationship, my brother and I, we are not Floridians, but we might as well be. I've lived here since I was a few months old, baby, and he was here since he was 4 years old. So we're both, Floridians. We're both Florida Panther fans. We both live relatively close in Parkland. So we've had a relationship with them just as fans and just, South Florida businesses. And as far as the recipe came, I would love to take credit, but I believe that was John Lynn in marketing who, when he was thinking about retro and they were talking and brainstorming, he remembered that Floridian was not the original Floridian. So I actually had forgotten at that point, but he reminded me that it was a different recipe. So I thought it was a great idea, not mine.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know that I think you're going to be giving away a jersey and a couple of other surprises, if I'm correct, at the launch party.
Yeah, like an LED, a Floridian LED. Yep.
And is Floridian still your top seller? Because I know you're one of the few breweries in Florida where your number one, or at least for a long time, wasn't necessarily an IPA. And as beloved as Hop Gun is, I think Floridian is still, from what I remember, kind of your number one.
It is. It's gone back and forth. Not back and forth. Hop Gun's gotten close over the years, but has never quite overtaken it. And we came out with them both, early on. Those were our two flagships, and we really kind of just stuck with those. But yeah, Floridian, and continues to be the number one seller in the tap room as well.
That's amazing.
Seltzers on both of their heels now. The Seltzer is growing faster than we can keep up with.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And the Seltzer seems to be available, almost statewide, but the Retro Floridian is only going to be in the tap room, correct?
As far as I know, that it might be released possibly to some accounts. It would be very small if it is. It could be just a tap room release. I know it's a small batch that we're doing, very small.
Gotcha. Well, I definitely look
it's
forward
going to be something I bring back.
With as tasty as it sounds, I'm a little surprised that it took this long to bring it back.
I told you I completely forgot about it. I'm glad. That's what I was going to say. I will do it again. And now that, well, obviously we'll see what the response is, even though it's a pain in the butt to brew. But, it's something I literally haven't thought about in probably 8 years.
That's funny. That is absolutely amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I definitely look forward to getting the word that Retro Floridian is out so I can go by and grab a crowler or two.
Please. We'll see you at the brewery.
Hey there, fellow Florida beer enthusiast. We now have an official Patreon. In case you are unfamiliar, Patreon is a great way for a community to support the creators of the content you love, like the Florida Beer Podcast. If you're enjoying the content we bring you on this show, or any of the shows on the Florida Podcast Network, you can help ensure that content keeps coming through for a small monthly donation equal to the price of a couple cups of coffee a month. So for just a few lattes, you can make a real difference. And the first goal of FPN's Patreon program is to help me get a better mobile setup to use whenever I can start traveling to great breweries here in the state of Florida. So if today's episode brought you valuable insights and information, please help see that these episodes keep coming by becoming a patron. Head to patreon.com/Florida Podcast Network to support the show, and it comes with some pretty sweet benefits. Want access to bonus extras? Nostalgic for these old school radio shoutouts? Lover of good quality merchandise? Well, not only will your monthly contribution help me grow the show, but you'll get some cool stuff in return. So please head to patreon.com/Florida Podcast Network for further details to become a patron. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Florida Podcast Network. You can also find the link right there in the show notes or by visiting floridabeerpodcast.com. Thank you in advance for your continued support. So just like he said, you can find the Seltzers pretty much everywhere in the state of Florida. The Retro Remix Floridian is only available on tap in the Oakland Park tap room, so I definitely can't wait to get my hands on some. Thank you so much for listening. The Florida Beer Podcast is a production of Florida Beer Media. You can find us at floridabeerblog.com, floridabeermedia.com. Please find us on social media. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Florida Beer Blog. If you're on Facebook, we're at FL Beer Blog, where you can find us every Wednesday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern for the Sunshine State Happy Hour, our live show talking about beer, food, alcohol, Florida, and just all points beyond. It's a fun show. We are also a very proud member of the Florida Podcast Network. Find them on Facebook at FPN Insiders. It's our inside private group for all things Florida Podcast Network, where you'll get an inside scoop to all the latest and greatest coming on to the network and some of the awesome new shows that I know are coming, but you don't know are coming. So definitely check it out. There's a lot of great material that's going to be coming underway. So once again, check FPN Insiders on Facebook. Find out all about those other shows. Let us know where you've been in the state, some of the great breweries that you've been to. Find insider information, some behind the scenes stuff. Maybe we'll get some giveaways on there and so on. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Our field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please make sure to subscribe to us on the podcasting app of your choice. Like us, rate us, give us a nice healthy 5-star review, and tell your friends. All of that helps us move up the charts and hopefully get more people to listen to all the amazing things that are going on with Florida craft beer and hard seltzers and hockey for that matter. We will see you next time. Thank you so much, and drink Florida craft.